Welcome, everybody. I am very, very excited. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. My name is Renee Johnston. I am one of the co-chairs for the National Black Caucus of the Green Party. I am also a member of the Green Party of New Jersey, and I'm a committee chair for the Green Party of New Jersey. For this month, we have been trying to do a number of different conversations with people. We kicked off the month with Brian Quoba and had a conversation about his new book on Hubert Harrison, which folks can definitely check out. And then I'll drop it in the chat so people can see it. We're actually going to be doing another talk coming up this week on the 26th. Shout out to Felina, who is in the chat somewhere. And we're going to take a look at whether or not the Black Lives Matter movement has actually worked. So, do Black Lives matter yet? Is the question that we're going to be posing for that conversation on the 26th. And I did drop that link in the chat for folks to be able to sign up if they have an interest. Additionally, if you want to learn more about the Black Caucus of New Jersey, of the National Black Caucus of the Green Party, you can feel free to check us out. I will also drop our link for our membership and more information on the Black Caucus Greens in the chat for folks who have an interest in taking a look at that. For really what we wanted to do tonight was do a real focus on Malcolm X. For people who are not aware, today is the 61st anniversary of the day he was assassinated at the ballroom in Harlem. And I have with me Dr. Jared A. Ball of Morgan State University, professor of Africana Studies, and my co-host at Saturdays with Renee on Black Liberation Media. And I want to give everybody a heads up that I had initially invited both Todd Burrows and Jared to have this conversation, but Todd is working and unable to join. And I will hesitate to say that we're gonna miss out. We'll miss out on Todd's shenanigans, but the information I think will be just as good. But as we, into the 61st year, last year, Jared did a full look at 100 years of Malcolm for his 100th birthday. And I just felt like Jared would be the perfect person to have this conversation with. But I will let you, Dr. Ball, don't, I never call him Dr. Ball, Dr. Ball, introduce yourself and let the folks know kind of some more about your history and study of Brother Malcolm.
So peace, Renee, and everybody. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And yes, we're going to miss out greatly on Dr. Burroughs' absence, but we'll just invite folks to check out all the content that we have with him involved. To at some point to get his views on this and to talk more about the work that he worked with me on in co-editing A Lie of Reinvention, correcting Manning Marable's Malcolm X. So there's years of panels and presentations and debates and arguments that we've been in, that we've had with each other on my channel on Black Liberation Media. So I invite people to check that out. And it's also an honor to be back in community with the Green Party's Black Caucus. So I deeply appreciate that and the effort that you all represent. Yeah. And the short of it for me is just, I mean, like many people of my generation, it was being introduced to Malcolm and reading his autobiography, and then eventually reading all of his speeches and everything and then eventually a lot of the books about him that led me to new levels of radicalism and new levels of setting sort of a bare minimum, a baseline for interpreting the world and how we should engage it. And as you pointed out on the show earlier today and previously, just going back as I was doing before we got started here tonight and listening to his speeches and doing even as our comrade Kahindi Andrews has done in his book, by using the speeches as a text to study, which I think is a really good methodology. We see that he was prescient. He was correct then. He's correct now. Any of his shortcomings are strictly about the time and place that he came into being and into adulthood, and was cut short. And especially now that I've turned 54 and reflect on the fact that he was assassinated at 39, it's increasingly clear how ahead of his time he was, and I don't often like to speculate, but how I think he would have evolved even, to be a greater interpreter of the world and activist and exemplar of radical politics had he not been assassinated, which is of course why he was. I mean, and I do honestly think if we just think objectively as possible about what it would be like to be a political enemy of Malcolm X and to see him operating in the world, that it's not, I don't think it's complicated to realize that he would have been such a target. That I mean, if I was just listening again, it's like you can't how could he be allowed to be, you know what I'm saying? Because then and then not only do you get rid of him, but then you make room for all of the whack analyses that you and I talk about every week and that many of us are struggling against today. I mean, that would be completely impossible if Malcolm had been allowed to continue living. So yeah, anyway, I'll stop there. But I just yeah, I'm happy to be in conversation about him and his work.
I've shared this with Jared now a couple of times just 'cause I'm like obsessed with listening to this book now. But as I was doing my random Audible scroll, there is an Audible book called Speeches by Malcolm X, and it's actually like a literal collection of his speeches and his interviews. The last one I listened to was him, and I don't know where this young lady was from, but it was a fascinating conversation. And Baldwin was there, and it was the three of them like having this conversation, and it's just literally like like all the recording. And I think they snuck in because it's Audible, so I'm making a guess. It's not like a whole lot of information as you go chapter to chapter, and I didn't dig too deep into like looking at the details or any of the technical stuff. But I think they snuck in some speeches from the movie, which is a little like disconcerting for me, I gotta say, because I'm like, this doesn't sound like Malcolm. This sounds like Denzel playing Malcolm. So next time I see you, I'm gonna have to play you some of these clips. I like screenshot it because I'm like, I feel like this is from the movie. I'm not 100% sure. Um, but so I have, and you said it, there's so many speeches, so many quotes, so many things that Malcolm said over his years of being in front of people that still resonate and are as true today as they were then, and probably will continue to be true when, it's his 150th anniversary of his birth, the 100th anniversary of his assassination. So I'm going to ask you a tough one, which is there any one speech from Malcolm that stands out for you as a person who has so deeply studied Malcolm?
So I just want to make sure my audio is still good. I had to put these headphones in to try to block out some of the noise in the house. And so if that is good,
You,
let's
you
see.
sound a little tinny, but I mean I can hear you. But people in the
Yeah,
chat,
no, no,
we're
no.
getting thumbs up, so they can hear you. They can hear you.
That should be. I hope that's better.
That is better. That is better.
Okay.
Yes.
And so you were asking me. I'm sorry. You were asking what is there some what?
Is there any one speech or
Mm.
one thing from the long list that stands out for you as like the one that is just it's the one thing that he said or spoke about or was in his speech that just resonated more than all the others?
Off the top of my head, no, only because I don't often, my memory is terrible and I don't always remember where he was saying what when I heard him say what. But but it's also that, and just even listening to the collage I was listening to before we got started, it almost to me doesn't matter. And I am also thinking about Kehindi's book a little bit, that in the way he did it, that so I was thinking of it this way. Actually, I meant to say this in the last response, but so the short answer is no, and then I definitely want to return the question to you. But one thing I meant to say, there was also something that I happened to be, long story, how I got here is irrelevant for right now, but I ended up listening to this discussion about the history, about evolution, and the advance of IQs, and some of the debates that have been waged against Black people and Africans about having lower IQs, this, that, and the third, and all that. And one of the ways to dispel the white supremacy and the colonialism in IQs that this person was laying out in their argument was that, and they brought in the scholarship to support this, but I'm oversimplifying it here. What I thought was interesting is that when I was thinking about it, because I'm thinking about this in terms of Malcolm being assassinated at 39, me being 54, where he already was, where he would have been had he not been assassinated. And the argument in terms of this IQ piece was that if you took people from 100 years ago and measured them on today's with a today's IQ test, they would register somewhere around cognitive deficiency levels. Like they would, like at a societal level, we would be looking at people who by today's standards would be seen as basically needing care and assistance. So obviously the issue isn't that people 100 years ago were all genetically, biologically just dumber than all of us. It's that over the last 100 years, the reason why IQ scores of today would be seen as much higher versus the people 100 years ago is because it's 100 more years of learning, of sensory development, of more complicated reasoning, just or 100 more years of complicated reasoning, da 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 da. In other words, the point being that if that someone who scored at advanced above average 100 years ago would be seen uh, uh, could be seen on today's standard, if you account for all the blah blah blah, as even being even more intelligent, because they would have taken that advanced level of cognition and had all of this extra added to it. And that's generally how I think of would be a good way of considering Malcolm X and people like him, that they were already at such an advanced level, and whatever was in their, whatever shortcomings were in their analysis was due based on them having the insufficient levels of information and time in complicated analysis that we've had the benefit of and the hindsight of. So just to throw that out there, and I think it becomes more evident as we go back and even listen to his speeches that, again, so much of what he was saying 100 years, well, in terms of his birth 100 years ago, or 50, 60 years ago as an adult, are relevant today. If we just amend some of the names and dates and places and some of the details, it's there's not, unfortunately, much different. So, but no, I can't, off the top, I can't think of just one. I mean, even his interviews, that I was reviewing for, in particular for the series last summer. I mean, there's so many bars and gems and quick and skillful responses in short media moments that I think are really remarkable. As someone who struggles with that himself, I find that to be really impressive. And then I'll stop here by saying that we also don't have a media environment that we had at that time, and that despite its shift and appearance of being more open and diverse, et cetera, and so forth, in terms of a mainstream, we would never see someone akin to Malcolm X be put in mainstream media spaces, even to debate and disagree with preferred Black leadership. So all that to say, he was far ahead of his time. I can't think of one media hit that was or speech that was. I mean, Ballad of the Bullet, Message to the Grassroots. I mean, these are the legendary ones that people often point to. But the debate at Oxford, maybe. But but I think I don't know. Just the media hits and the panels and the debates and stuff. I think are equally impressive as well. So all that
It
to
is,
say, what do
yeah.
you think?
Oh, I don't have an answer either. I tried, like, I spent some time really kind of scrolling through because I was trying to decide as I was trying to plan for this conversation, like how much planning do I want to really have to do with this, right? Like how much in advance. And I was like, all right, well, I can try and pick some of the ones that I feel like, are like most important, like the things that I feel like are most important, right? So I'm thinking, like, as you just said, the ballot and the bullet, especially being that we're coming to this as the Green Party and having this conversation about third party and electoral politics and looking at policy and what policy does within communities, which he spoke on often, right? But then I started thinking, okay, but then also he had all these gems when he was talking about how the media responds to things and how the media will make you think that the oppressed is the problem. And, then he had all these gems when he was speaking on the LAPD. And then he had, like, and so I gave up and I was like, I'm like trying to pick one or two things or four or five things is not going to work because as you just said, there's too many. Like it would be impossible to try and pick one. And and so I had like my little mini list of things that, like, if this comes up, this is, here's the quote if it comes up in the conversation so I don't lose it. But I have to agree with you. I just don't see, I don't see a I could not I could not like get it down to like picking one. I couldn't even get it down honestly to picking less than five, and that was why I gave up in trying to like pick a set of speeches that we could talk about. But we have a question in the chat already, so I think we can just, we can roll like we always roll with things.
Sure.
So Arthur asked, speaking of Malcolm's speeches, I'm curious to hear both of your thoughts on his knife in the back speech. That was the first time I've heard Malcolm speak and had a profound effect on my political consciousness, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it.
Oh, I literally was listening to that. That's one of the ones I was listening to as we went live. Shortly before we went live. That if I'm catching that correctly, that and I have quoted that all the time. In fact, I used to have a poster that had that on it, where Malcolm made that point. And it was in this case, it was in response to a reporter asking him about his suspension by the Nation of Islam after his roosting chickens comment. And the reporter was trying to press him on basically saying, were you right in making that point? And Malcolm expertly was saying, listen, I wasn't saying anything different than everyone was saying that Kennedy was a victim of this climate of hate. I only rephrased it as roosting chickens. And he said, I think the reporter may have said something, but he said, his point was that this climate hasn't changed, that we're not making any progress. And that was when he made that comment saying that progress is not plunging a knife 9 inches in my back and then pulling it out 5 and expecting me to say thank you. I mean, and I was just like, that has just been a bar forever. And it's still how, and I literally think of that routinely as we are constantly asked to accept some form or another of some minor concession as revolutionary change. And it's like, no, no, you barely took the knife out. And then as he went on to say, you haven't repaired the wound. You haven't healed the pain and the and all of that. So before we can get anything about apologies and forgiveness and progress, we have to acknowledge what has and has not been done. And that's why I was saying before, Malcolm was so brilliant at getting us to raise the standard, so that we can't be gaffled by so many things. I mean, he was, and really to your point, by the way, just quickly, that in terms of the why I joined the Green Party years ago, why I am honored to be back in conversation with the Black Caucus, is that this is what a version, at least, of what Malcolm was advocating, and what Marable and others have literally cut off, literally truncated when they were quoting his commentary on how Black people should engage the vote, and cutting him off after he was saying, uh, uh, register Black people to vote, and then leaving out the fact that he was saying so that we can have our own parties and our own, uh, um, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a pack, but that's that he didn't say that, but that's,
The
you know,
block,
a
the
block.
voting
Thank you.
block.
A voting block, exactly. So that's, and that's what I see us doing here. It's saying, let's get together, let's get some clarity around what we need and what we want and how we would want to approach this whole thing, and then we will determine who is, running on our behalf and beholden to us, and that's what he was advocating. So at least in a way, and yeah. So yeah.
And, I'll just echo that I use that line a lot about pulling the knife out partway when I talk about reforms. Right? Whenever there's any conversation about reforming anything, I immediately go to that, right? Like, because that's what it is, right? Like, you pull it out a little bit and then you want me to be excited because it's not 9 inches in anymore. And I just, I don't have it in me to be excited about the halfway fix or the partial fix or the crumb or the, like, I have no interest in that. And I have no desire to, to concede that at all. Like, just no, I'm not participating in that nonsense anymore. I'm not doing it.
No,
So
absolutely not. And yeah, there was something I was thinking to say, but it just slipped my mind. But yeah, no, I mean, but this is again why I constantly try to remind everyone that this is, Malcolm, as I said a minute ago, was this is one reason why he was assassinated, and then for the last however many decades, we've had to struggle with how he's been rebranded and repackaged and remarketed, so that we don't fully appreciate that at minimum that he was saying you have to raise your standard for how you approach this thing and what you will accept from it,
yeah.
and how you would
Um,
define what it gives you. Yeah.
right. And so since we're on this conversation about electoral politics, we can go ahead and talk about the ballot and the bullet, just, you know, for a little bit at least. And so one of the things that I think I hold on to that Malcolm really talked about was this idea of, you have to choose a method, right? It's going to be the ballot or it's going to be the bullet. And that his focus was not just, we have these conversations all the time about electoral politics and whether they're actually useful and if they serve a purpose and, all these things. And I am always fascinated that Malcolm's stance was, you have to look at the policy that is directly impacting your communities and make the decision as to how you are going to address those policy issues, right? And so for me, this is why the conversation with regard to electoral politics is one that I'm unwilling to relent on also, right? Like, I don't I don't fault people who choose not to participate or who say it's nonsense and they don't want to, deal with it. They don't have time for the duopoly. All of those things to me are very valid. And in fact, today, talking to Isam, and he was saying, like, the fact that, your election day is on a weekday, like, that, like, all these things that are put in place in order to make it as difficult as possible in order for you to actually participate in the process. But Malcolm's focus on policy and, wanting to run people from within your own community that have a vested interest in what's happening in your community, right? Um, Looking at the absurdity of Black people remaining to be like champions of the Democratic Party, which continues to be a thing, right? Um, so all of these discussions and interviews and conversations that he had continuously about the electoral process. And so I feel like this is something that, as a Black Caucus, the National Black Caucus of the Green Party, it's something that we should be feeding off of, right? We should be presenting these ideas and these thoughts on electoral politics as part of how we get people to be invested in learning more about the Green Party. Because I feel like if, as our goal, like one of our missions as the Black Caucus is to get people to understand why the Green Party is a valid choice for Black people, right? And so, what do you like? Any thoughts on any of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, and it again, it didn't go well when I tried to do it, but I did like, and I still kind of like the line that when talking to Black communities, that we need to the extent that we're doing it in the context of a Green Party effort, it should be done to make the point that the Green Party needs to become the Red, Black, and Green Party. And so when you look at what Malcolm was saying in the Ballad of the Bullet, there's at least a couple things I think that need to be remembered from that. One, he talks in that speech about getting rid of whoever's in Congress, getting rid of whoever's in elected office at this point because they have proven themselves incapable of addressing themselves to the needs of Black people and anybody else. He talked about the need for developing new allies and approaching allegiances differently, because currently, and this is something we still see today, when people often want to tell us, oh, the Green Party is just another third party pipe dream, or the white folks in the Green Party are granola this or corny that or whatever. It's like, but if you read the Ballad of the Bullet, or listen, better yet, listen to the Ballad of the Bullet, what Malcolm was saying, as I interpret it, is that it kind of like what I've said in defense of the Green Party today. So you saying you don't want to hang out with the white folks in the Green Party, but by default, you're then saying you're going to hang out with the white folks as Malcolm would have said, the Dixiecrats or the Dixiecrats in the Democratic Party. It's like what it's yeah. I mean, it's not some sort of Black radical nationalist claim that detractors are saying. They're just they're saying, in effect, they would rather side with the more powerful enemy than the weaker but still potential ally. The other thing, though, is that I think it's important, specifically when we're thinking about the Green Party and Black Caucus and in the context of Malcolm, is that Malcolm was also, and this is something I really valued by doing that 100 Years series that I encourage people to check out, because I was reminded of a number of things, and in particular, the broader context that Malcolm was working in outside of just the vote. So, in other words, when he wasn't the radical approach or the reworked approach to voting was just one component of what he was advocating. So when he had been meeting with Robert Williams and Mabel Williams. He had been building with the Revolutionary Action Movement. As I was reminded last year, that is the only organization outside of the Nation of Islam that Malcolm joined. And people, we always leave that out. We leave out all of the internationalism, the armed struggle, all of the socialism, all of the Pan-African, all of the other politics that Malcolm was working with, as he was then also saying, but to the extent we're engaging electoral politics here in the United States, this is how we need to do it. And we need to do it with the idea that we're going to assume some political power and then redistribute some of the resources that this society has. Because as Kahindi has reminded us, and others have reminded us, Malcolm did have his eyes on the most revolutionary activities possible, while also keeping an eye on the immediate needs of his people and his communities, and saying if there are resources around us that we have helped produce through our labor and the exploitation of our labor, we should have access to it. And the way to get access to it is through electoral politics if we address it a certain way and in the context of it being one part of an array of political approaches, which is why he was saying it's either the ballot or the bullet. And he was also giving that as a warning to the state itself. And he predicted accurately the violence that was going to come later that year and the years to come as a result. So, yeah, just some of what I'm thinking now and what I think about when uh, that speech or how we can interpret it today and what we're going to do about the vote come up.
And I mean, and of course because I feel like we're always in an election cycle. Like even though there's supposed to be these breaks, I feel like the election cycles never end. And the minute one ends, they're already prepping you for the next one, right? Like it takes no time before you start getting the text messages and all these things. And one of the other things that I really appreciated um, about Malcolm and his approach was how he looked at the leadership, right? What we now call the Black Miss Leadership class, and and that's been a coin frame. Like we didn't make that up, but this, and he got a lot of pushback often because, of course, he was really speaking about some of the people that were super popular, as far as in the time being people that the press didn't mind putting forward, right? So obviously, like Martin Luther King didn't live, right? So he was. It's not like he was given much grace. I don't want it to seem as if I'm pretending as if he was popular. We recognize that in the time he wasn't popular, but because of his message, he was allowed to be in the forefront, right? And so when we think about Black leaders and who gets put in the forefront today, right? And who is allowed to have the seat at the table, as they always say, or who is allowed to raise their hand in the UN, and who is allowed to speak as the press secretary. And I feel like it's always some bubble-headed Black person who is not representative of a lot of what Black people care about and think and want, but they're the person who's willing to go along with whatever it is that the current administration wants, or the mainstream media narrative wants, like what they're expecting to be represented, so that people can look at them and go, oh, okay, well, it's a Black person saying it, so it must be okay, right? Because I feel like that's what they do all the time. Like, well, we'll let the Black person do it because people will look at that and they'll be like, oh, well, it's a Black person, so it can't be racist, right? Because for whatever reason, people think that's a legitimate way to put things. What do you I mean, some of his conversations about Black leaders, I cackle because he was really, on top of everything, being prolific, being able to come up with a line like off of nothing, being able to just speak off the cuff, like all these things. Malcolm X was funny. Right? Like he he could cut a one-liner, and sometimes you listen to speeches and I am cackling because I'm like, he is getting all over them. And I don't even know if people understood in that time, or if people understand now how truly absurd this whole thing is with the Black Miss Leadership class. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, and I always think it's funny because I know he didn't invent it, but he coined, but Glenn Ford sort of coined the popularity, the misleadership class phrase, and I always remember that this was one of the few areas where he and Bruce Dixon, the late great co-founder of Black Agenda Report, and struggled within the Green Party, where they disagreed. Because Glenn always argued that Black people should be creating our own party, independent of any other. And Bruce, for a variety of reasons, thought that the Green Party was an important vehicle. as do I. But where we all agree uh, and agreed then is that what was clear from the perspective of the ruling elite then as it is now is that you can't have uh, I mean, even to your point about how King was played off against Malcolm, and this was done by design in the mainstream press to create these uh, false opposites, to limit the discussion nationally that would be seen as acceptable for Black and anybody else in Black people or anybody else wanting to struggle. And in many ways, I was even thinking as you were talking, kind of in a twisted way, there is not only is there no misleadership class of today without killing both of those men, but there's no perhaps need to kill a Dr. King if you have not already killed Malcolm. Because once Malcolm is assassinated and King is sort of left on his own, so to speak, as this singular dominant figure who is himself radicalizing, uh, then he becomes a target, and he because he has no foil against which he can be played. There's no, there's no boogeyman that they can hold up Dr. King and say, he's the better version, and then he himself, that is the better version, becomes more radicalized and starts sounding more like the one they got rid of first. It's like, well, we got it now. We got to kill another one. Um, but but lastly, yeah, just to that point, I mean, I think about it a lot. None of us, myself included, there are no more, like so many of us who occupy various spaces of Black punditry, media work, journalism, political organizing. So many would be repurposed or made moot had Malcolm and others not been removed, and then of course rebranded so well over these many decades since the assassination. Um, but yeah, so the but I mean I don't know, the enormous media machine, the documentary film machine, the dramatized Hollywood machine, the podcasting machine. I mean, there's so many billions of dollars being generated for the ruling elite by misrepresenting these histories and promoting them for sale on various streaming platforms. And none of this is possible because, in fact, this ruling elite wouldn't exist if you don't get rid of Malcolm. I mean, I mean, again, whenever I think about it and allow myself to speculate, it is pretty clear to me that we would have sometimes I don't know exactly what it would have looked like because I think there would have the contradictions would have been brought to a head if Malcolm is not killed. The the society, whatever the society would be had he not been killed, is almost unimaginable. I think at this point, for good or for bad. I don't know. I mean, who knows? The conflict we might lose, the repression might get worse. Um, and that's when I start thinking about George Jackson. So it's like, but anyway, so
Right. It's almost impossible to like not, to start it all blends so well together, right? So, we've been doing these webinars. This is kind of a new thing that the Black Caucus is doing, but one of, as one of the new co-chairs, one of the things I'd like to do is to continue these conversations about different things and outside of Black History Month, right? Like we kicked it off this month because it was the easiest thing to do. So you should expect like the George Jackson conversation that's going to come, and the Fred Hampton conversation is going to come, and like the Franz Fanon, like all these conversations have to come because all of it all feeds into how we are going to remove ourselves from all of the things that are preventing us from seeing clearly, right? And so my goal in all things is to provide pathways for people to get beyond what we've been taught about ourselves and what we've been taught about our people and what we've been taught about being Black itself. How do we get beyond all of these things to move towards a path where we're actually fighting in a real way towards the true liberation of our people, right? Like that's the goal for me in the end. And it's a big one. And I'm probably not gonna live to see it. But I'm okay being like a small person that's at the start of like whatever it is that gets us going. Um, there's a couple of questions in the chat, so we'll go to the chat real quick. Um, so Anonymous says, what would be a good way to embody some good thoughts and maybe quotes to use nowadays? So I think they're trying to figure out like how do we use Malcolm in public spaces to share this information.
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know. Somewhat similar to what I've already said. The way I end up doing it is, and I don't know if this works for everyone else, is again to be reminded of the standard he was encouraging, so that uh, what is often attempted to be passed off as a collective solution, but is ultimately some individual or effort meant to benefit a small group or class element within the community, is more easily called out. Um, uh, but Malcolm, again, it's just cliche and vague, but join organizations, commit to radical courses of study, uh, which means moving beyond just individual reading. It does require some study groups. It doesn't require some sort of political education work, and beyond just the individual, again, reading of something, um, and then trying to just yeah, it's very hard. I don't know, but once that is done, then the critique, not always inviting popularity and being welcomed, is more easily offered. I mean, it's harder to be uh, uh, bamboozled, if I may, by misleadership class, by uh, media narratives, by the platformed pundit trees, offers of solutions and responses. And then it forces us to be reminded of what are the core and important components to radical critical analysis and movement making that Malcolm that he exemplified, which are again militancy, internationalism, Pan-Africanism, however you want to define it, some engagement, meaningful engagement with socialism and materialist analysis and redistribution, radical approaches to one's faith. I'm often guilty as an atheist of de-emphasizing his Islam, and that's a mistake. Malcolm was a committed Muslim and saw as his relationship to Islam that meant being a revolutionary. And so whether I am an atheist or someone is a Christian of any variety or a Jew or anything else, he is a reminder that there are revolutionary traditions in whatever race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexuality, whatever you claim, whatever label you adopt, there is a radical tradition there. So tap into it, find it, and apply it to the situation that we find ourselves in today. And that, yeah. So yeah, stop the ramble there. But
No, but I appreciate that. And you know what, I think so this audiobook has been really, really something for me to listen to because there really is just there's so much, right? And I think for people who are trying to figure out good ways to implement like Malcolm's message and different things is to find the ones that resonate with you the most and share them, right? Like listen to the speeches, listen to the interviews. Cause you said this earlier and I was thinking to myself, that is so true. I think sometimes even his interview responses at times are even more like like, whoa, did he just drop that bar? Like, did anyone just hear what he just said? And it's like off the cuff, him just answering a question, right? Um, and so I do think it's important, to be knowledgeable about all the different, because he did a lot. Like, he was in a lot of places, he spoke to a lot of things. I actually kind of forgot about this whole back and forth that he had on the Canadian broadcast. Like, I just happened across that in searching. That was a fascinating question and answer session. And so I think one of the things that folks really could do is find the things that resonate with you the most and talk about them, right? Share them in your circles, send quotes to people, send links to people, and encourage discourse amongst your own circles, with regard to like why these conversations matter, why we should be talking about these things. Because I think that's one of the things that we fall short on as a community is we don't talk to each other enough, right? There is definitely not enough communication happening amongst people within their own smaller communities, right? Within the larger expanded community, within organizations. Like, if you're in an organization and you all is supposed to be working towards, like, really expanding the Black radical tradition and moving towards Black liberation and all these things, then these conversations should be a part of what you're doing, right? And if they're not a part of what you're doing, then this is your opportunity to introduce them to what you're doing, right? Throw a Malcolm quote out there and see what kind of discourse that starts, and I'm just a firm believer in, do the readings, do the work, and whatever you come up with, like, share it, and share it often, and share it whenever you find reason to do so.
I actually think we should I'm not even that active as I should be. Just but I think honestly I think his interviews should be used as training tools for activists who are going to do media work on behalf of organizations. And I always remember the late great Damu Smith, working with him in Black Voices for Peace years ago. And he would do that. He had training sessions with us, and he would say, what is the line of our organization as it relates to Israel, and what is it, and now answer you in 60 seconds, and then 30 seconds, 10 seconds, and then he even had it down to 5 seconds, because you're going to get, a news person's going to put a microphone in your face at a rally. You have to give an answer that is going to end up on the news. How Malcolm could do that, could it be helpful in that, because of the way, and the way even Dr. John Henrik Clarke used to talk about how he would work with Malcolm, and um, I don't know if this is apocryphal or accurate, but he talked about how he and Malcolm strategized, and he would say to Malcolm, before an interview, don't go there to answer the interviewer's questions. Go there to say what it is you have to say, which is, I think, a very important tactic as well. But yeah, I think that yeah, it would be great, just one more value to Malcolm's life and work is, he could be a training tool for up and coming activists and how to engage media, especially today in this podcasting world and YouTube world and all of that. We should have more training for folks,
Yeah.
to the extent it's not happening. Yeah.
So another question in the chat, Terry says, had Malcolm not been killed when he was, would liberation struggles have morphed into the Black Power movement in the US? It seems like his death, along with MLK to a lesser extent, served as a catalyst for more radical leftist politics to develop.
I mean, I think you could argue dialectically that's a good point. It's also, difficult. But I do this when I'm stuck in traffic. This is a tactic to stay out of road rage, just to think about, scenarios like, what if Malcolm had lived? And in one version that I've thought of, the speed between the pace between Malcolm and George gets ramped up. So, I think the question is a good one. And again, dialectically, it makes sense to say, yes, it was his killing that sparked this, that sparked that, that sparked this. But I think we could also speculate equally that had he not been killed, he might have made more sophisticated his work, advanced that work, evolved that work, and we might have seen something better. Maybe we would have seen a more advanced and fast-paced Black Power militancy, more organized, more internationally resourced, and who knows? I mean, maybe there wouldn't have been a slogan. Maybe Kwame Ture isn't making a speech, and maybe he's moving quietly, like the Qassam brigades and all of them over there. I mean, I'm just saying. I don't know. I don't know. But I'm telling you, literally, I do this to avoid road rage. I will sit up and I have fun with it. What yeah. So run those scenarios. Run. What do you think?
Right. What do you think? Right.
No, I'm
So,
literally
and I,
asking you though. What do you think? What you
so
trying to play host and avoid the
listen,
question?
listen. So this is an interesting one for me because like there's a part of me that does not want to concede that the death of greatness is how we got the other
Hmm.
things, right?
Hmm.
Because like even though yes, it's quick succession, like you consider like he was assassinated in 65. I think the Black Panthers started in 66, correct? And then you had Fred Hampton's killing in 69, you had George Jackson in 71, and all these things were in quick succession, true. But the brains that started the Black Panther Party did not suddenly morph into existence in
Hmm.
66,
Hmm.
right? These were all people who were part of the struggle already, who were already doing the work, were already doing the study, were already doing the writings, were all right. And so, yes, they may have formalized what they were doing, but who knows what that formation would have looked like had Malcolm not been
That's what I'm
assassinated.
saying.
Right. So and so I struggle with this, like, is it, do we really want to consider it as the catalyst per se, right? And there are things that like are clear catalysts, like the murder of George Jackson in the yard at San Quentin was the catalyst for Black August,
Hmm.
right? Like there's no you can't
Hmm.
separate those two things.
Hmm.
However, the organizing, the work, the struggle, all of those things, as we learn from, Tip of the Spear, right? These things were already ongoing, right? And Black August was simply another method that those who were being held hostage by the state chose in order to do the work, right? So could the work have just been as good but better had George Jackson not been assassinated on the quad at San Quentin? Like I don't know, right? But I hesitate to give any credit to the loss of a great mind. Like period. I can't. I struggle with doing that. So I don't know. I hope I answered the question, but
No,
I
I think
think I
so.
think that's where I'm at with.
I mean, I think it's cool to think of, to your point of we would like to think of we'd like to think if we can get the good without the bad. And but maybe a different form of good would have just happened, so yeah. I mean, if Malcolm isn't killed, maybe the Panther Party isn't formed. Maybe whatever is formed is something else. Maybe it's even more effective. Maybe it's even more threatening. Who knows? Who knows? What I again though, think it is important to bring back from this moment of speculation is that we do not have to speculate that from the perspective of those in power, Malcolm had to go. And however people want to measure the state's involvement, what is clear is that they needed him out of here. And regardless of who people want to say or focus on in terms of who killed Malcolm, nobody benefited more than the state and the ruling elite. So you could say the nation killed him, but the Nation of Islam absolutely did not benefit more from his assassination than the state. Uh, Nowhere close. Not, I mean, in fact, it's like really from the perspective of the Nation of Islam, it doesn't make any sense to have killed Malcolm. So,
Right.
but whatever. Look. I mean, yeah. I don't. It's.
It's a lot. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lot. Um, so the last thing I think, and then we can start. We'll see if any more questions come up. And there's a comment from David in the chat that I do want to read. But before I read it, um, I'm gonna throw this to you and let you think as I read David's comment about
Mm-hmm.
when people get assassinated. But one of the biggest things that I think gets missed even today from conversations about Malcolm and what he was focused on was his truly like his intense desire for a Pan-African struggle, right? And the need for there to be this combined effort of Black people, no matter where you are on the globe, to work together towards our collective freedom. And he was very adamant, um, about Black people not being Americans, right? Like this land is not for us. It doesn't care about us, right? We should not be laying claim to it. I am a supporter of that notion. But also the fact that he very much did a lot of work to try and navigate, like, how do we work with Black people everywhere, right? And I always found it to be very interesting that he had the opportunity to leave the states and to relocate. Was it Kenya, Ghana? Do you remember? I can't. I'm
I
blanking
mean, it
on
could have
where
been
he was
really
invited.
anywhere. I mean, he could have. Yeah, off the top, I don't remember, but he was invited. I mean, he was invited to stay in Guyana with
Bishop.
not Bishop, but Jan, the author of that. Oh my God, I'm past my bedtime. The author of the
I know.
Ghosts in Our Blood book.
Oh yes,
Let me. Oh my God, this is terrible. Uh,
Jane
Terrible.
Carew. Jan Carew.
Jan Carew. Thank you. Exactly. Um, so and yeah, so I mean, I think he had any number of opportunities. He could have probably gone any number of places in the world, and in that book, he's they're discussing, Malcolm, why don't you just chill, stay out of the country, let things cool down, and then come back later. And or when he was traveling with the revolutionary Black women, basically throughout Africa, that took him on, to eventually meet with Shirley Graham Du Bois and uh, that whole Vicky Garvin and that whole crew that forgive me again, but they all said the same thing. You know, a version of, you could do some sort of expat thing and be here in Ghana. You could be, and he was saying no. I mean, he was saying, listen, and he was even telling them, like, I know you have a kind of nice little setup over here and everything, but don't forget, we can't just abandon our our community back home, or not home, but back in the States. And uh, he recognized that the freedom struggle here would not be successful without international support. And he also realized, and I think admirably, that those of us who would have an opportunity to just dip out and individually, you know, should not do that. And I even think it's a metaphor in a microcosmic way for, this whole bastardization of the talented tenth notion, that, and be reminded that even in Du Bois's, Du Bois was saying the talented tenth wasn't supposed to be that you just, run off and leave the rest of the black community. You're supposed to take what benefits and privilege and resources you have to benefit the community and not abandon them. And it's like the international version of that. He's saying you can't just dip. You should leave to build ties, build unity, build support, build international pressure, but you do have to come back home and, as he said, stop singing and start swinging. And I think, whether it was his overt willingness to support the king side of the civil rights struggle, whether it was the covert willingness to build with Ram more militant, uh, even guerrilla warfare capabilities. He was a full spectrum revolutionary, and I think he understood all that is necessary for a community to win. And he was not, as I think we see too much today, about just all the tough talk and the bluster, uh, which of course he could do and do well, but it was all in service of actual broad-based, full spectrum radical work. And so he didn't. He said, "Look, I'm not going to abandon the civil rights. I'm not going to abandon Black America. I'm not going to abandon electoral strategies. I'm not going to abandon the international community. I'm not going to abandon socialism. I'm not going to abandon Pan-Africanism. I'm not going to abandon Black nationalism. He was like, I'm not abandoning none of it until we figure out which combination of all of these things actually frees us." And I can't, and that's why to this day, and I'll stop here. That's why to this day, there's so many people, myself included, who argue that we are in Malcolm's lane politically, because he was I think so sophisticated and nuanced and capable of appealing to such a wide swath of African world and other radicals, that everybody wants to take a piece of him for our own preferred, their biases. And my point a minute ago of my own bias against a focus on religion, I ignore too often that aspect of him. But he was, again, a full spectrum revolutionary that I and we all should appreciate and look to mimic as best we can. So
Yeah. So the reason I started down that path is two things. One, and I'm going to share a link to Kehinde's book in the chat, for folks who are unfamiliar with that work. And the title of the book is "Nobody Can Give You Freedom." So Kehinde Andrews is a scholar in the UK, and he writes, this book is basically his attempt to utilize Malcolm's work, his words, his speeches, his writings, everything, to help people to move towards an organizational strategy. And, like all books, there, you can have a hit or a miss. People don't fully agree with like his tactic with how he wrote things out. But in the effort of making sure that we have a clear analysis, I want to make sure that people recognize that we do not think that Malcolm was perfect, right? And as you said, there are things that he fully believed at the time that I personally think would have evolved as the nature of the world changed, right? One thing that stands out for me the most is his belief that the world would serve a purpose, like that the larger international body would rise up and somehow recognize that there was a real issue with the basic dismissal of the humanity of Black people across the globe, and that the world as an international body would come together to make sure that this thing stopped, right? And so we would call the attention of the world to the injustices within the United States, and the world would answer the call and would come to the aid of the Black people here in the United States and somehow find some way to assist us to alleviate the oppression under which we were living. And I think, given the UN was relatively young, right? We were still kind of it had been created, but I feel like by early 60s, we're only looking at like maybe a decade and a half, right? Like not super long.
Well,
Um,
almost 20 years, Malcolm already saw that they were full of it.
he started to get he did, but even in I can't remember which thing I was listening to, and he was saying that part of the problem with the civil rights struggle is that in order to have civil rights, you have to assume that you have human rights. And if you are living under an oppressive system that denies you of your human rights, then a demand of civil rights is never going to get you anything that you actually need, because you're never going to get civil rights if you don't have human rights, which I fully agree with also. But in the effort of making sure that we have a principle discussion, because I personally think that this is one of the missteps. And although it started to appear like, again, he did not have long enough for these things to really like play out fully, and for him to get to a place where maybe he could have had a separate analysis or an evolved analysis on how all these things went. But one, would you agree with my thoughts on this, or am I wrong? And two, are there other spaces in which um, we can look at what Malcolm talked about and say, well, this is a place where we think like this seemed right in that time, but now as things have evolved and things have changed, we have to really consider that it was the analysis of the time, and so we should be
I
thinking of it
mean,
differently.
no, I think you're probably right about that. And I was just only thinking about uh, his recognition of the shortcomings of the UN's role in the Congo and with Lumumba. But my first thought in terms of where I thought that he just didn't have the appropriate foresight, and how could he, is in the devolution of the OAU into what it has become today. Um, but again, going back to our previous point, this is these are part of the his assassination, him not being around long enough to see what happened, is in part what allowed what happened to happen. So again, it's like, so had he not been assassinated, again, I don't think the misleadership class just here in the United States suffers. I think the misleadership class throughout the diaspora suffers. Because again, as I always love to point out, when you read John Lewis's memoir of 20 some odd years ago, and he talks about being the leader in the leadership of SNCC and going all around the continent of Africa in 64, he talks about how every leader he met had already met with Malcolm, and all of them had said to him, if you're anywhere to the right of Malcolm X, we don't even want to talk to you. So Malcolm had become, again, the standard of Black politics globally. And so now, does that mean, I'm not going to go so far as to say that if he's not assassinated, the OAU becomes this revolutionary Pan-African organization, because they weren't even as advanced as he was at the time. But that is just, anyway, when you ask the question, that's one of the first things that comes to mind. Um, I do have to say, I do want to say, I think, because it's important in terms of this point of bias, and I can't help but bring this up. So everybody should read Kehinde's book. I do think there are two areas where Kehinde's book exposes his bias or my own. One is Kehinde, I think, takes a couple of shots at communism, and makes, once in his desire to make clear that Malcolm was not a communist, um, which is correct. But I think why Malcolm wasn't a communist and why we are critical of that today are two different things. But that's Anyway, and the other thing that is that Kendi, I love the point about making Malcolm's speeches the basis of the text from which Andrews performs his analysis. But there's this part where he says, something to the effect, I want to use Malcolm's text because I want to avoid all of the nonsensical academics who have been abusing Malcolm's, you know, and then he cites the very academics who were doing it. So, so I was like, that was my one little, one little thing. But again, this is largely, my bias, as I've said, that needs to be checked and expanded as well. Um, but all that to say, because one of the points I was going to make from that is that I think he would have learned or seen, well, he already saw the value because he was already building with Castro. He already saw, and he already saw the value of socialist revolution, and he was already engaging with the Socialist Workers Party. He was already, raising questions and um, I think he would have had an appropriate critique of the Soviet Union to the extent it was necessary. And I think he would have seen that the fall of the Soviet Union was brought on by the West and had ultimately a negative impact on the aspirations of liberation struggles all around the world. So I think, yeah. So that's that, and I also think he would have evolved the at minimum the correctness of Nkrumah Toreism, the United States of Africa under scientific socialism, as a sort of bare minimum standard for because again, Malcolm was also clear on the class issues too. He was clear about the problems of the black bourgeoisie. He was clear about the neo-colonial compradors internationally. So that's why I'm just trying. I don't know. It's always hard to speculate, but it's my point in finally wrapping up here is that he had so much of the correct foundations analytically that it's difficult to suspect he would have constantly made errors or remade the same errors and not learn from his past mistakes. It just doesn't. I That's the one thing when I do speculate that I can't see. People say, well, he could have just, could have become an old conservative. And it's like, yeah, I mean, theoretically, yeah. I mean, he could have, I don't know, maybe he, I don't know. I just can't see it. I just can't see it. And that's why they got him. That's why
That is
they
why. That
had
is
to. They was
100%
like,
why.
because he was uncompromising. But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'm putting in the chat the link that David Silberg, shout out to David, shared from the Black Agenda Report,
Mm.
an interview, one of the last interviews that Malcolm did, that I really think folks should take some time to take a look at if they have interest. David also said assassinations may radicalize people, but the leaders that the system are murdering are being murdered for a reason. The Malcolms of the world have an ability to move masses of people, and I think that's a fair statement. Um, Carlos says, could it be that they were rapid response units? While they did a fantastic job, all things considered, the pressure they were born out of left room for areas of exploitation that would have been avoided or minimized if the leaders had not been assassinated. So I think this is kind of following up on that same conversation on whether or not the assassination led to these broader pushes and formations towards Black liberation. So I appreciate that. Con, I don't know if you have anything. I think we kind of answered that. Um, Someone asked what you think of the documentary on Netflix, Who Killed Malcolm. You did a whole thing on this, and so
A lot.
I'm
It's
gonna
whack.
direct
That's my short answer. It's whack.
it.
And they took a shot at us. The only part I want to highlight for this moment is that if you watch the documentary, there's a scene where they go into Sankofa Books, which is personally hurtful, disrespectful, and they look at our book criticizing Manning Marable's, and then he says to his son, "No, that's not the one." He says, "This is the one you need." And he picks up Marable's book. So they go out of our way to take a shot at us on their way to producing a truly unhelpful, misleading, misrepresenting document. But there's if you want more, please go between my channel, Black Liberation Media. We have I don't know, probably I don't know 30, 40 hours on it, maybe more. I mean, there's a lot of discussion. Well, about that documentary, particularly, there's at least 5, 6 hours of good, solid hate. It's trash. It's really, 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 really bad. Really, really
And
bad.
I
Yeah.
will drop also a link to you and Todd Stephen Burrows' book, A Lie of Reinvention. That is the basis of the graphic, in case you didn't notice, for
Yeah, it was dope. Yeah.
what
Thank
was
you.
initially set up for this conversation. So shout out to that. I did drop. Sorry that it's an Amazon link. That was the first one that I found. I
I
would
mean,
have.
I think technically, if we wanted, you could still get the book directly through Black Classic Press. We should probably just encourage that to the extent that they don't benefit from an Amazon purchase. And honestly, I don't even know the the economics of that. But
Let's see. Oh, look at that. You said it and I was able to find it. So, all right. So
boom.
what we're going to do is we're going to disregard the Amazon link and we're going to use the Black Classic Books link. There we go.
All right, thank you very much.
So at
And
least there's
and
that.
and again, that's Paul Coates, father of Ta-Nehisi and former Black Panther Party member, Baltimore, who runs that legendary press. So,
And then
yeah.
the last question in the chat, David again is asking if Malcolm ever acknowledged and made reference to the We Charge Genocide petition to the UN from the early 50s by Patterson Robeson. It seems that he would have been aware of it, but I don't recall him referencing it. He definitely did reference it because it was part of the whole international thing was to bring the charge of genocide, and it was in part based on this We Charge Genocide, which was written in the 50s. So I
Yeah,
do know it was definitely referenced.
yeah.
I've never dug into it to see like what the direct lines were between the two, but I do know that it was definitely part of that conversation of what the OAU was trying to do.
Yeah, I don't remember a specific reference to that either off the top of my head, but it would be absurd almost that he wouldn't have. In addition to what you just said, I mean, he was also a big supporter of the Bandung Conference. He would have absolutely been at the Tricontinental Conference had he not been assassinated before that. I mean, I mean, he had to have been aware of all of that and made use of it in his speeches. So I'm sure. Um,
All right.
yeah.
So I am going to share a quick video for that the caucus has put together for our next upcoming panel. So I'll play that before we close out. But before I do that, Dr. Ball, I want to I want to thank you one for always. There are very few times that I've ever asked Jared, "Can you do a thing for me?" And the answer has been, "No, I can't." And so I appreciate that you always are willing to share time and space and your great mind with me and with the folks and everything. I can't say it enough. I so appreciate being in community with you, and I hope you know it. And I just thank you. But
I appreciate that. And
is there anything that
likewise.
we missed that you thought
Oh,
you should have said or
I'm sure, but I'm also sure I don't remember that either. So uh the feelings are mutual and extend also to the Green Party and the Black Caucus in particular. It's an honor to have been invited back here, and I salute all of you and the great work that you're doing. It's essential, and thank you. So yeah.
And I'm sorry to do. I saw. Oh, did the hand go away? There was a hand, but now it's disappeared. So
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know what just happened. But all right, so we'll close out. I'm going to share this from the National Black Caucus for our upcoming webinar on our Do Black Lives Matter Yet? Feel free, Jared, if you have other things to do. I don't even
Just
know if
go
I
to
can
sleep.
get this video to work, so we're gonna give it a shot to share, and then we'll close out. But again, folks, thank you so much for the time and the attention and for hanging with us on a Saturday evening. Rest in power, Malcolm X, 61 years. Can't you like it's all it's crazy when you really think about it. It really is.
Yeah. And
All
thank you,
right.
Renee, for your work. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Let's see if I can make it work, y'all. Let's see. Nope, that didn't work. Look at this. Look at me messing all this stuff up. There we go.
Should we be hearing something though?
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
hear anything.
Okay, hold on. Look, there I go. Y'all can't put me in charge of no button pushing. See?
And I don't
See?
know how to work Zoom. I don't know.
Okay, hold on. We're gonna give this one more try. Felina, I'm trying. I hope you see me trying to do this. Hold on. We're gonna try again. Sure.
I don't hear anything. Am I the only one?
All right, folks. Thanks so much. Have a good night. Peace.